Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tank Encyclopedia channel. A lot has been discussed lately about the Challenger 2, Leopard 2A4, and more recently, Abrams tanks that will end up in Ukraine. The opinions of commentators vary wildly. Some argue that these will be completely useless due to the superiority of some Russian tanks in certain regards, while others are saying that they will represent the be-all and end-all of the Ukrainian victory over Russia. Of course, both of these extremes are absurd in and of themselves, and the situation is far more nuanced and complicated. Now, we are not going to give a presentation on the three tanks, as there is already a lot of content about what they are and their capabilities on the internet. They are modern, Western-style main battle tanks with strong armor, good mobility, powerful equipment, and potent firepower. While the variants proposed are not the most modern out there, and they are certainly lagging slightly behind the paper characteristics of the most modern Russian tanks, they are competent and battle-tested weapons systems that should acquit themselves well in the battlefields of southern and eastern Ukraine, especially against the older types of Russian tanks seen in that theater of operations. And don't forget, tank versus tank combat is not actually that common, even in Ukraine, and should not be the focus of a judgment on the capabilities of a vehicle. A more revealing angle to look at is that these vehicle types are far and away superior to the best Ukrainian tanks that are currently in mass active service, not counting a couple of captured and reused Russian tanks. Focusing on armor protection, gun penetration, or engine horsepower is the perfect way to analyze a tank, at least in video games. In reality, things are complicated, and there are other nuances that are far more crucial than steel-equivalent protection. One small note before we continue. This is a hot-button, rapidly evolving issue, so some of the information in this video might be surpassed by current events by the time this video comes out. The main points, however, should still remain valid. Two important topics, far more important than the paper characteristics and penetration statistics of the guns and whatnot, should be at the forefront of the discussion about the delivery of modern Western MBTs to Ukraine. However, they often get overlooked. We get it, they're not as glamorous as 60-ton metal boxes that go boom. We know, we understand, and that's our gut feeling as well. The first topic is politics. Western aid to Ukraine has evolved into a sort of gradual crescendo as opposed to an all-in response from NATO and the EU. If you all recall from last year, military help actually started with shoulder-launched missiles, which then saw the addition of light armored vehicles, slowly evolving into the supply of self-propelled artillery, then HIMARS, and relatively recently, modern anti-aircraft and anti-rocket systems. The apparent next three steps in this crescendo are modern Western IFVs, MBTs, and fighter jets. Of these, IFVs have already been pledged to Ukraine in the form of Bradleys and Martyrs from the US and Germany. The reason for this gradual approach to military help are probably more complex than we here at Tank Encyclopedia can explain, but they do revolve around three key issues. The first issue is Russia itself, which has never been happy with any help that Ukraine has received. While most of the Kremlin's comments on the topic are quite hypocritical, and the Russians are widely viewed in the West as the bad guys with whom no negotiation should be undertaken, it shouldn't be forgotten that Russia is still a major local power and a nuclear-armed one, so some care in dealing with them is highly advised. How much and how this care manifests is something for the politicians to discuss and decide, but some wariness isn't absurd. Now, of course, Russia has proclaimed its indignation to each of the previous step-ups in weapon supplies, but except for commenting and bombing civilian infrastructure, they have done nothing of consequence in response. The second issue is internal NATO support. We guess that most of you have observed that there is a cost of living and an economic crisis pretty much everywhere. This should have impacted the appetite of European countries and the USA for supplying aid, military, civilian, or financial, to besieged Ukraine, which is something that the Kremlin has probably banked on at the start of the conflict. However, widespread public opposition against aid for Ukraine never materialized, and sending military supplies to Kyiv remains relatively popular in most NATO and Western countries, going as far as seeing protests and significant political pressure in favor of sending the Leopards into Ukraine. The final political issue is availability. European countries and NATO have taken the peace dividend idea to heart, and military investment in the last 30 years has been almost constantly dwindling on the old continent. The peace dividend was an idea that emerged from the dissolution of the USSR and the end of the Cold War. The existential threat was gone, so Western nations started slashing military budgets and investing more in their economies. This situation has led to the low availability of many military systems, and the coalition of the willing has found itself unable to supply the desired weapons systems in the needed quantities without facing the possibility of stripping their own armies of vital equipment. However, in the last year, NATO armies and industries have started successfully approaching the problem with new acquisitions, repairing older and stockpiled equipment, and covering the capability gaps of other members. All in all, the recent announcement of the supply of modern Western IFVs and the whole discussion around the main battle tanks do indicate that these three issues are being addressed or mitigated, and that the decision makers in Western capitals are gearing up to supply more and more military help to Ukraine in its fight against the Russian invasion. While the Ukrainians may not get everything they want in the quantities that they want, this handful of tanks that are being promised or discussed is an important political signal that they will be supported more and more in the future. You may view that as a good thing, as a fight against tyranny, or as a bad thing, as it will lead to an escalation that will see more and more death and suffering. But this is what these tanks are pointing to in the grander scheme of things. The second important topic that is missed about these tank transfers is logistics. Now, Ukrainian logistical personnel have probably become top-class professionals on the topic of maintaining small numbers of a stupidly large spectrum of completely incompatible military systems. However, adding 3 more major systems that are completely incompatible with anything else in service in Ukraine and with each other is probably not going to help things in the short term. On the contrary, it will probably be slightly detrimental. On the topic of rapid battlefield impact, the 200-odd T-72s pledged at the latest Ramstein summit will certainly be far more important than whatever numbers of Challengers, Abrams, and Leopards have been committed in the end. They are logistically compatible with what Ukraine already has. Ukrainian crews and commanders are already trained with them, and they fit with the existing Ukrainian doctrine, so they will get to the battlefield quickly. However, therein lies the problem. The West is running out of T-72s and spare parts for those that it can easily access in order to ship them to Ukraine. If this conflict continues for more than a year, and there is nothing militarily that suggests it will end sooner, then the West and Ukraine will need to figure out ways of replacing the old Warsaw Pact equipment used by Ukraine, as they will be attrited and spare parts will eventually run out. And this facet makes the transfer of modern Western MBTs make sense in the medium and long-term planning of the war, even though it will cause no end of logistical, training, maintenance, and command trouble in the short term. And here's the point where the 3 tanks significantly diverge. The Challenger 2 has only seen a production run of some 390 vehicles, of which about 220 are still in active service, and about 150 are planned to be upgraded to Challenger 3. Now, while the maximum plausible transfer of 240-odd Challenger 2s is nothing to scoff at, it is rather unclear how many of these surplus vehicles are operational, how many are easily repairable, and if there are enough spare parts available for them. The only operators of the Challenger 2 are the United Kingdom and Oman, which has a different version with a different engine and different equipment. The available pool of vehicles and spare parts is not exceedingly big, especially when you take into consideration that the United Kingdom would very much like to still have a functional tank force, and this means that the total available number of vehicles that could realistically be donated to Ukraine is relatively small, probably not more than 100. Furthermore, there aren't that many, if any, commercially available upgrade packages for the Challenger 2, so these cannot easily and cheaply be brought to the most modern standards. This also isn't helped by the fact that its engine, its drivetrain, and its main gun are unique to it, and there isn't any cross-compatibility with other stuff being sent to Ukraine. Ammunition is another big problem, as it uses a rifled gun that is incompatible with NATO ammunition, and stocks for this ammunition are relatively low. The Leopard 2 and Abrams are different beasts in this regard. Germany had more than 3,000 Leo 2s built and sold all over Europe, including to a number of countries that would love to send some to Ukraine, so the Leopard 2 is available in greater numbers. There are spare parts aplenty, it fires NATO standard ammunition, and the sheer number of upgrade packages that have been proposed or are available is mind-boggling. The Abrams is in a similar situation, with 10,000 built and large numbers available in reserve. While there aren't that many foreign operators, the U.S. Army alone should have the spare parts and ammunition stockpiles to supply Ukraine, and a very important country is also acquiring it, Poland. Furthermore, there are upgrade schemes aplenty available from the States, although not exactly commercially available. In short, the Leopard 2 and Abrams tick all the checkboxes required to become the main battle tanks of Ukraine's armored forces in a long, protracted war with Russia. They are capable, they are available, and the know-how of maintaining, repairing, and upgrading them is widely available in NATO. This isn't something that will be quick. Even if this decision was just taken, preparing these vehicles and accompanying material, refurbishing them or even building them new, transferring them to Ukraine, training new crews, training maintenance personnel, training commanders, and all the rest, will take many, many months. This isn't something that will make its battlefield impact in the first half of this year, if at all in 2023. But this will have immediate impacts on the strategies that will be adopted by Ukraine, Russia, and the West. Ukraine will have to figure out a way to widely adopt new weapon systems into its army and its doctrine while still keeping the war going. It would have to adopt new bridge layers, new recovery vehicles, new maintenance and repair facilities, etc., etc. The West will have to figure out a system to produce enough spare parts and vehicles to keep both Ukraine and its own armies functional, and hey, maybe even standardize equipment finally, and also how to retrofit and refurbish the variety of hulls that will be offered piecemeal by some nations. Russia, on the other hand, will end up on a timer before its technological edge, at least tank-wise, wears off or is even reversed. And the Russian army is already running out of clear advantages over the Ukrainian army. These are all monumental challenges that will significantly shape future events far beyond the battlefields of Ukraine, and it is these considerations that will make the transfer of Leopard 2s, Abrams, and Challengers so very important, far more than the already significant battlefield contribution of a new brigade or more or less of modern MBTs. Whatever figures will be announced this month, more will trickle in small numbers in the near future. But this isn't about the near future. It's about the long haul. Well, that is all we had to say for now. What do you think? Did we miss anything in our discussion? What do you think about these vehicles? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. There's more content coming soon. Thank you to everyone who supports us and keep us in your sights.